My wife secretly sold my family's $500, $0 inheritance to her lover, then forged my signature to buy a $200, $0 house, and now she's accusing me of theft. How did it all go so wrong? I never thought I'd find myself in a situation where my wife, Lisa, would turn out to be the biggest liar and cheat I've ever known. The craziest part, it all started with something so innocent. At least I thought it was. We had been married for 7 years, and I genuinely believed we were solid. She always put on a good face, but lately I'd noticed little things. Missed calls, late nights, her phone always locked then fort. I brushed it off as work stress or maybe just her being busy. But then I found out the truth, and it was like getting punched in the gut. It all started when I came home early from a business trip. I wasn't supposed to be back until the next day, but I had a gut feeling I couldn't shake. Something didn't sit right. I decided to surprise Lisa, maybe catch her off guard. As I unlocked the door, I noticed her phone buzzing on the kitchen table. It was a text from some guy named Mike. Nothing unusual, right? Except that I'd never seen her text anyone like that before. I picked up the phone and saw a string of messages, flirty, suggestive, talking about meeting up, can't wait to see you tonight, and even some explicit stuff. My stomach clenched. How could she do this? I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I quietly sat down and read every message. The more I read, the more I realized this wasn't just a fling, it was something serious. She'd been sneaking around for months, lying to my face, pretending to be the perfect wife. I started to piece together what I'd missed. Her odd late nights, her secretive phone habits, the way she'd suddenly become more distant. I felt betrayed, not just because she was cheating, but because she'd been lying about everything. She'd been hiding a whole other life from me, and I had no idea. The worst part, I found out she'd been selling off parts of our family inheritance, our savings, almost $500,000, without telling me. I always thought we were careful with money, but she'd secretly sold some of our inherited estate to her lover, Mike. She'd even forged my signature to buy a house 200,000 worth without my knowledge. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. How could she do this? How could she betray me, our family, everything we built? I felt like I was living in some twisted nightmare. My mind raced with questions, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal. I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't sure what would happen next. The confrontation didn't happen right away. I needed time to process everything. My head was spinning, and I was filled with a mix of rage and heartbreak. I spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how my wife, Lisa, who always acted like she loved me, could do something so malicious behind my back. I kept asking myself if I missed the signs, if I was blind to her lies. But deep down, I knew the truth was staring me in the face. She had been hiding a secret life, and I was just starting to uncover how deep it went. The next morning, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed answers, every single one. I called her at work, and when she answered, she sounded off, nervous, defensive. I told her I knew everything, that I'd found her texts with Mike, that I knew about the sale of our inheritance, and that I had discovered her forging my signature to buy that house. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then she started to lie badly. She said it was all a misunderstanding, that she was under a lot of stress, and that Mike was just a friend. Yeah, right. I could hear the fake sweetness in her voice, the way she tried to manipulate me into accepting her excuses. I asked her how she could do this, how she could betray me, our family, for some guy. Her response: she called me paranoid, accused me of not trusting her, and then threw in some classic lines. "You're overreacting, you're just jealous, and you don't understand what I'm going through." I felt my blood boiling. How dare she turn this around on me? She was the one sneaking around, selling our inheritance, forging my signature, and lying to my face. I was furious, but I also felt a deep sadness. I loved her, or at least I thought I did, and now I couldn't recognize the woman I married. She had become a stranger, a manipulative, selfish stranger. I knew I had to decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to break everything off immediately, to cut her out of my life and move on. But another part, more stubborn, more vengeful, wanted to make her pay for what she did. I realized that this wasn't just about infidelity. It was about betrayal on every level. She'd taken our savings, lied to me, and now she was accusing me of theft. That was the last straw. I couldn't let her get away with it. I started planning my next move, thinking about how to expose her, how to reclaim what was ours, and how to make her understand that I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed evidence, proof of her deception, her financial crimes, and her lies. I started digging into our finances, pulling bank statements, looking for any inconsistencies. I contacted a lawyer I knew just to get advice on how to handle the situation legally. I knew this was going to get messy, but I was ready to fight back. I wasn't going to let her ruin everything we had without a fight. The betrayal cut deep, but I was determined to come out of this stronger. I didn't know exactly what I'd do next, but I knew this was just the beginning of a war I wasn't prepared to lose. Over the next few days, everything started to unravel faster than I expected. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Every time I looked at her, Lisa's face twisted in my mind with that sneaky smirk she always used when she was hiding something. I knew I had to confront her again, this time with proof. I couldn't just accuse her blindly. I needed facts, solid evidence that would hit her hard enough to crumble her lies. I went through our bank accounts, credit card statements, and the shady paperwork she'd left lying around. Sure enough, I found the transfer receipts, those secret sales of our inherited assets, the forged signatures on the house documents. I even managed to get copies of the documents she had forged, which confirmed my worst fears. She sold off our $500, $0 inheritance to her lover, Mike, and then used my name to buy a house without my knowledge. That house, by the way, was in her name, but the mortgage was under my forged signature. I felt sick just thinking about how deep she'd gone into this web of lies and betrayal. Armed with this evidence, I decided it was time for a serious talk, no more hiding or pretending. I called her at work again, told her I had everything, and demanded she come home. When she arrived, I was already waiting in the living room, holding the documents like a weapon. Her face changed when she saw the papers. She knew she was cornered. I didn't hold back. I laid everything out, the sale of our assets, the forgery, the secret house purchase, and her endless lies. Her reaction. She spun her usual story. It's not what it looks like. I was overwhelmed. Mike's just a friend, and you're making a big deal out of nothing. But I wasn't buying it. I told her I had proof and that I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I told her I was done being naive, done being played for a fool. Her eyes flashed with anger and frustration, but she kept trying to gaslight me, saying I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I was accusing her of things she didn't do. She even had the nerve to say she loved me, but that she needed this to be happy. That was the last straw. I saw right through her lies. She was just trying to save herself, to spin her way out of this mess. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt my heart breaking, not just from the betrayal, but from the realization that I had been blind, trusting her blindly for so many years. I'd built a life with her, shared everything, and now I was staring at a woman who had betrayed me on every level. I was furious, but I also felt heartbreak. I wondered how I had missed all the signs, how I had been so stupid to believe in her love. The shock was overwhelming, and for a moment I questioned everything, my judgment, my love, my sense of reality. But I knew I couldn't stay in denial anymore. This was real, and I had to accept that my marriage was over. I told her she needed to leave. I couldn't look at her without feeling disgusted. She tried to beg, to cry, to manipulate me into forgiving her, but I was beyond that point. I knew I had to start thinking about myself, about protecting what little was left of my sanity and my future. I called my lawyer again, ready to take legal action. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not without consequences. As she packed her bags and left that day, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who had lied and cheated her way through our life together. I knew this was just the beginning of what would be a long, messy fight for justice, and for my own peace of mind. After Lisa left that day, I thought I'd feel some sense of relief, but honestly, it was mostly just numbness. I sat alone in the house, staring at the empty space where she'd been. All those years we spent building a life, a future, gone in a matter of weeks, erased by a web of lies, greed, and betrayal. It was surreal. I kept replaying everything in my head: the secret sales, the forged signatures, her lies about being overwhelmed or just needing something more. It felt like I'd been living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The first thing I did was contact the lawyer I'd spoken with earlier. We discussed the legal options, especially about the house and the inheritance. It turned out that because she forged my signature, I had grounds to challenge the purchase, and I could also pursue legal action for the financial fraud. I was determined to get back what was ours, whatever it took. But even with the legal stuff in motion, I knew that emotionally I was shattered. I'd trusted Lisa for so long, and now I realized she'd been manipulating me for months, maybe years. Her charm, her smile, her love, all a lie. It cut deep. In the following days, I started to piece together the full scope of what she'd done. I found out she'd been secretly siphoning money from our joint accounts, funneling it into her own accounts, and then using that money to fund her affair with Mike. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. She'd spent months lying, sneaking around, and secretly planning her escape. The worst part: she had the audacity to accuse me of theft, claiming I'd taken money from her, that I was controlling, that I was the problem. It was laughable. She was the one stealing from us, hiding everything, and now she was trying to turn the tables. I started to feel anger rise inside me, but also a strange sense of clarity. I realized I couldn't let her get away with it, not just legally but emotionally. I had to reclaim my life. I began to reach out to friends and family, telling them what I'd uncovered. Some were shocked, others angry on my behalf, but all of them supported me. It was a small comfort to know I wasn't alone. I also hired a private investigator to dig deeper into her financial activities and her relationship with Mike. I needed every piece of evidence I could get to make sure she didn't walk away with a dime more than she already had. Throughout this process, I kept asking myself why she did it. Why betray everything we built? Was it just greed, or was there something else? I couldn't wrap my head around her motivations. She'd always been a bit bitchy, manipulative, but I never thought she'd go this far. The betrayal had shattered my trust, and I was left with a bitter taste of regret and anger. Still, I knew I had to stay strong. I couldn't let her win by breaking me down emotionally. I had to fight for my rights, for my sanity, and for the little piece of peace I could salvage from this mess. The days passed in a blur of legal meetings, financial reconstructions, and emotional exhaustion. I knew I had to prepare for the worst. She might try to fight me legally, or worse, try to come back and manipulate me again. But I was ready. I'd been betrayed on every level, but I refused to let her ruin me completely. I started to accept that my marriage was over, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. Trust was gone, and I couldn't rebuild what was broken. All I could do now was move forward, learn from this nightmare, and make sure I never let someone like Lisa get that close again. The legal process dragged on, but I felt a strange sense of relief as each step moved forward. I knew I had the evidence to prove her fraud: those forged signatures, the sale of our inheritance, the secret bank account she'd opened. It was a mess, but it was my mess now, and I was determined to clean it up. I spent hours poring over documents, cross-referencing bank statements, and working with my lawyer to prepare for the inevitable court battle. Sometimes I'd sit alone in the house, staring at the empty spaces where her things used to be, feeling the weight of everything she had stolen from us. One day, I finally received a court date. The hearing was set for a couple of weeks from then. I knew I had to be ready. I gathered every piece of evidence I had: photos, bank statements, the forged documents, even recordings of her lying during our conversations. I wanted her to see I wasn't just some naive husband getting played. I was someone who was serious about getting justice. The more I prepared, the more I realized how deep her betrayal went. She manipulated me for months, maybe longer, all for her own selfish gain. It made me sick to think about how she'd lied to my face, pretending to be the loving wife I thought I knew. But as angry as I was, I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I started to see the bigger picture: how her greed and selfishness had poisoned everything. I realized that I'd been holding onto a fantasy, a version of our life that was never real. The Lisa I loved was gone, replaced by someone who only cared about herself. That realization stung, but it also freed me. I knew I had to let go of the past, no matter how much it hurt. I couldn't keep living in denial, clinging to what once was. It was time to accept the truth and move on. In the meantime, I started to rebuild my life, slowly but surely. I reached out to friends I'd lost touch with, leaned on family, and even got some counseling to help process everything. It wasn't easy. Every day was a battle between anger, sadness, and a strange sense of relief that I was finally taking control. I also began to think about the future, what I wanted for myself now that the betrayal was out in the open. I knew I'd never forget what happened, but I also knew I couldn't let it define me. I had to find a way to heal, even if it meant starting over from scratch. The court date finally arrived. Sitting there in the courtroom, I felt a mixture of nerves and resolve. I presented my case, laid out all the evidence, and watched as Lisa's face twisted in anger and frustration. She tried to deny everything, but the truth was staring her right in the face. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning. When the verdict finally came down, it was a huge relief. She was found guilty of forgery, fraud, and financial deception. The court ordered her to return the stolen money, and I was awarded full custody of the house, and the remaining assets I could prove were legally mine. That day, I felt a strange mix of victory and emptiness. I'd fought hard for justice, but the emotional scars ran deep. Leaving the courtroom, I realized I was finally free, free from her lies, her manipulation, her betrayal. But I also knew that moving past this wouldn't be easy. It would take time, therapy, and a lot of healing. Still, I was proud of myself for standing up and fighting back. I'd learned a brutal lesson about trust, greed, and betrayal, and I knew I'd never let anyone get that close again without really knowing who they were. I didn't exactly come out unscathed, but I came out stronger. That's all I can ask for now. In the aftermath of everything, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on how much my life has changed, sometimes feeling like I was living someone else's nightmare. The house is quiet now, too quiet sometimes, but I've started to fill it with new routines, new people, and a cautious sense of hope. I've cut ties with most of the people who blindly took her side, and I've learned to trust my instincts again, even if it's been a long road back to some semblance of normalcy. What I've come to realize is that betrayal like this, especially from someone you loved and trusted, leaves scars that don't just fade away. They stay with you, shaping how you see the world and the people in it. But I also learned that I am capable of resilience, of fighting through the pain and coming out on the other side, battered but stronger. I've become more aware of the warning signs, more cautious with whom I let into my life, and more determined to protect what's mine, emotionally and financially. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's that no matter how deeply you trust someone, always keep a part of yourself guarded. Because betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, and it can destroy everything you thought was secure. But also remember, justice is possible. You can fight back, even when it feels like the odds are stacked against you. I never thought I'd find myself here, sharing such a personal story, but if my experience can serve as a warning or even a small beacon of hope for someone else, then it's worth putting it out there. I've learned that revenge isn't about hurting the other person just for the sake of it. It's about reclaiming your dignity, your life, and your peace of mind. I don't wish her any ill will now. She made her choices and she's paying for them. The real victory is that I've taken control of my future, learned to forgive myself for the pain, and moved forward. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine now, to rebuild piece by piece. So to anyone out there dealing with betrayal, trust your instincts, document everything, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Sometimes, the hardest fight is the one for your own soul, but trust me, it's worth it. Because no matter how much someone tries to tear you down, you can always find a way to rise again.